Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited, The Man Crisis. Learn why so many men are struggling to find their way in an increasingly gynocentric world in The Man Crisis. Get your copy of The Man Crisis in paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.
Last Saturday, I was watching David Carroll's classic masterpiece on the Negro female psychosis. And as I was watching that classic video, I said to myself, I have to get a piece of that because many of the points he presents in his argument are close to what I talk about in my book, The Man Crisis. Now, when it comes down to many of these beta males who support this black woman and many of the beta male sons who come from this black woman and are raised in her single mother household, they are extremely dangerous. And I'd say they are more dangerous than this Afro-American Negro female because when it comes down to these beta male orbiters, Pookie and Ray Ray, who want the attention and approval of this black woman to have a relationship with her, and those beta male sons who are raised in that single mother household, what makes them more dangerous is they have gone and gotten caught up in this Afro-American Negro female's world. And when it comes down to her world, it looks like our world on the surface, but when you delve further into it, it is completely distorted. Now, in my book, The Man Crisis, I talk about how women often see the world from a rose-colored perspective. And in that rose-colored perspective, the world looks like our world. However, because everything is colored rose, they don't see what's actually there. And when it comes down to the beta male orbiters, Pookie and Ray Ray, and her beta male sons who grow up in these single mother households, they see the world from the distorted lens of this Afro-American Negro female. And what's worse is that as related to many of them, especially the sons, they have been raised to be taught to believe that her rose-colored perception of the world is reality. So when it comes down to these beta males, this is what makes them extremely dangerous because they have gotten caught up in her distorted reality and they actually believe her depiction of the world to be the real perception of the world. So most of these beta males, they are completely deluded about their state of reality. And because they are so deluded by their state of reality, they believe that everything that comes out of the mouth of this Afro-American Negro woman is the gospel truth. Because when it comes down to your beta male, he from birth, in most cases, has been taught to submit to the leadership of this Afro-American Negro female and to see this Afro-American Negro female as an authority figure. And because he, in most cases, submits and defers to her authority, and in even extreme cases, deifies this female's authority, like your Hoteps and your pro-blacks, this man does not question the things that he sees as related to her world, and he does not challenge the things as related to her world. And this is what makes the beta male actually more dangerous than the Afro-American Negro female, because he is so caught up in her distorted picture of reality that he cannot see the real world around him. And if you try to challenge his delusion, that's when this Negro will become violent. Because when it comes down to this beta male, he has been so caught up in this distorted picture that looks like reality that he cannot really deal with the actual picture of reality. And if he starts to see glimpses of that picture of reality, what he does is he tries to deny those pictures of reality and then tries to go back to the delusions that this black female has told him about the world. Now, this segues into a point I made when I was trying to talk to one of these young brothers out here who came from one of these single mother households. And this brother wanted to know what he needed to be a man, and he asked me after I made that video to elaborate on the point as related to how these black single mothers lie to their children. Because when it comes down to the black single mother, in almost 95% of cases, they lie to their children, and they lie to them about the world around them. And this is why I said in that video, you cannot take anything that this woman says to be the truth, because everything that comes out of her mouth is a lie, because the way she gets her needs met are completely different than the way a man gets his needs met. And this is something that the young brother had a little bit of a problem with, but when I listened to David Carroll's classic video on the Negro female psychosis, it proved my point about how these single mothers out here lie, and everything that they say is a lie, because when it comes down to their world is a completely distorted picture of the world. Yes, it looks like our world on the surface, but once you delve further into it, you see that everything is completely distorted, and you see that everything is completely exaggerated. And it's exaggerated because nothing in that world is based on any sort of logic that a critical thinking person can see as following a logical pattern. Everything in her world is from the rose-colored perspective, and because it's from the rose-colored perspective, it is all based on feelings. And that's why no rational critical thinking man can go by anything that this Afro-American Negro female says, and they have to really watch her actions, because she will sit there and give you these ideas that make absolutely no sense. And if you sit there and listen to the ideas that this female presents to you, you will wind up buying into her delusions, and you will wind up becoming one of her sycophants, like these beta males out here. Because what happens with the beta male? Because he has been raised in her rose-colored world, he has now taken on her delusions as a gospel, and he believes in every one of her delusions as the irrefutable truth. And this is something that many boys from single mother households wind up buying into when they are living in that home with that single mother. For example, when it comes down to many of these beta males out here, because they are raised in her rose-colored world, they often think of their fathers as monsters, and they think of their fathers as this quote-unquote deadbeat dad or this no-good man. And it's not until that young man goes out into the world and talks to that father that he starts to see that the story that he was told was nothing but a lie. And it's not until he goes out into the world and gets perspective from other men in the community that he starts to see the clear picture of what his mother truly was. But when it comes down to many of these boys who grow up in these single mother households, they don't have, a lot of them don't try to apply the critical thinking skills that way, and they take everything that their mother says as the truth about the world. And it's not until they actually go out into the world that they start to realize that everything that this female has told them is an absolute lie about the world, and that everything that she knows about the world is a complete lie. And that's when these guys start to crumble, because they came out into the real world expecting the delusions to be real, And now they're finding out that the world isn't what the mother told them it was going to be. And that's when these guys wind up having the beta male rage, and that's when they wind up getting frustrated, getting angry. And what further compounds their problem for many of them is they keep going back to the mother looking for help and advice. And as things keep not working, what happens is these men simmer, they boil in anger, and then eventually they wind up exploding in that rage because they found out that everything that this woman told them was nothing but a lie, and now they want to go out here and destroy the world around them because the world does not fit the distorted picture that this female told them it was going to be. And that's what makes these beta males extremely dangerous, is that they are so caught up in her distorted picture of reality, and they're trying to make her distorted picture of the world actually be the picture of the real world. Because when it comes down to the beta male, he wants that story that his mother told him about the world to be true. He wants the approaches that work for the woman to work for him, and he wants to try to make things that he has learned from the woman to work and function for him. But what he doesn't understand is he has taken ideas and concepts from a psychotic person, and when it comes down to a psychotic person, things that work in the mind of a psychotic person don't work in the real world, because when it comes down to a psychopath, psychopaths have their own logic. So most of these beta male Negroes out here, what happens to those black men and those black boys is their lives wind up falling apart because they're trying to take the logic of a psychotic individual and they're trying to reconcile it with the real world. And that's why many of these beta males, they have a hard time navigating a course in the black community, because they want to try to make the delusions of the modern day Afro-American Negro female, the concepts of a psychotic person, fit in the world of rational, critical thinking people. They are so caught up in those distorted pictures that they cannot really see the subtle differences between that actual world of the real world and the world that this Afro-American Negro female has created in her mind. And when it comes down to a lot of these beta males, especially your Pookie and your Ray Ray, they are complicit because they want that fantasy to be real. But a lot of the beta males in the single mother households, what really is sad about them is they were raised in this woman's taught this woman's mindset, taught this woman's culture, and taught this woman's ideas of the world, and they're trying to make those ideas work in the real world, and they are becoming frustrated when those ideas just don't work in our real world. Because when it comes down to many of these Negro males, whether they be Pookie or Ray Ray, or these beta male boys who grow up in these single mother households, they just don't understand that the female they are dealing with has serious mental issues, and these mental issues are deep and insidious within the mind of this Negro female. And if you don't understand how deeply damaged this female is, you will get caught up in her ideas of the world. And as you get caught up in the ideas that she has about the world, and you start buying into her broken logic, you will start to believe that her broken logic makes actual sense. And as you start trying to buy into that broken logic, and you start believing that that logic makes sense, you believe that her depiction of the world is real. And there's nothing most people can do to convince these beta males that her depiction of the world is not a real depiction of the world. And when I look at that picture and I just look at it, it's like you can see the complete, if you are a critical thinker, you can see the difference between the way a rational, critical thinking person has perceptions of the world, and you can see the difference between what this Negro female's perceptions are of the world. Because, again, the perceptions are completely different. And if you can, and there's two different perceptions of the world, because when you look at the real world, you can see what's actually there. But when you look at the Negro female's perception, it is telling you these lies and stuff about no good black men, no good trifling black men are dogs. And when we take a critical look at the picture and see what's actually there, we start to see, like, for example, with the novel Waiting to Exhale, one of the books I used to deconstruct and refute the arguments of the black woman as related to her points about there being this so-called shortage of black men, I went to Terry McMillan's own book, the book that was supposed to usher in the entire narrative of this whole there's no good black men, and I found the book to be completely from the perspective of a very psychotic individual, because they're sitting there talking about how there's no good black men, there's a black male shortage, and how they're looking for this good black man. But when you take a critical look at the behavior of those females in the book, your Savannah, your Robin, your Bernadine, and your Gloria, you start to see that when you see it from a logical and rational thinking perspective, two of those women were adulteresses. One of them was mentally ill, and the other one was an obese divorcee whose husband had become a homosexual. So they're sitting there talking about how there are no good men, but in, as I see it, 3 of the 4 cases, when it came down to those women, they were participating in some ratchet and reckless behavior, and they were talking about how they were no good men, but they were just as complicit when participating in that behavior with those no good men. So they're sitting there talking about how the man is no good and how they want a good man, but you're out here like Robin being a side piece to a married man, and like Savannah going out here with your high standards but still committing adultery by being a side piece to another so-called good man. You say you want a good man, but you're out here with men and participating in behavior like adultery, or you're like your Bernadine complaining about a white woman, but clearly that woman was psychotic because she was so caught up in her delusions about this husband of hers that she had put on a pedestal that she couldn't really see that this was not a man you really wanted to marry in the first place. He was no good before she even got involved with him. And in the case of your Gloria, she couldn't see that this man was an effeminate man and was one of these down low brothers that are out here. So they're sitting there talking about how the man is no good, and they make this their narrative that the man is no good. But when you start to take a clear and critical look and examine the behaviors of those women in that novel, the way I deconstructed many of these books and I started taking a critical examination of their behavior, you start to see what's actually there, and you stop buying into their narratives, because that's what a lot of people did during the 1990s as these books by people like Terry McMillan were coming out. They were buying into their psychosis. They were buying into their ideas. And it wasn't, and because there was nobody there to present a counterpoint, these females were allowed to push that narrative and talk about this no good black man. But when it took men coming out online to start breaking down how that argument made no sense, because once you started applying logic to those books and you started looking at the actions of the females instead of getting caught up in the emotions of their words, you started to see that they are just as complicit in their actions by going out here and doing things like having affairs with married men, or going out here and dealing with effeminate beta males. And I remember one book, Napoli Ever After, where the female inside of the book, this Venus Johnston, she was just completely insane, and she was so caught up in her own delusions that everybody that she interacted with was some sort of victim. So whenever you have these Negro males who are out here, they will get out here, especially the beta males from the single mother households, they get caught up in her distorted reality, and they believe everything that she says to be the gospel truth. They believe everything that she says to be the real perception of the world, and they're so caught up in her reality that they're trying to be this good man to please this Afro-American Negro female, not understanding there is no pleasing her, because when it comes down to her perception of the black man, she hates the black man because she hates herself, and what she wants is one of these white men who she deifies and worships like a god, and she wants that man to be her savior, who takes her out of the ruins of Blackistan. However, the big problem with that whole theory and that whole concept is that Blackistan is not a place that is your so-called ghetto. Blackistan is a place that emanates from the mind of this Negro female, and it's a place that she turns every place into, because when it comes down to many of these Negro females, they hate themselves, and because they hate themselves, they wind up hurting everybody around them, because when it comes down to this female, she does not believe that she is worthy of anything, does not have any sort of value, and that again comes from that mental illness that she has. And because she has that mental illness, this is something that no person can really go out here and help her with on the outside. A lot of them need to get some sort of mental health counseling, because this psychosis has to be dealt with by a mental health professional who understands much of the mental damage of the human mind and can find a constructive solution to dealing with that damage in a medical environment where they can examine this psychosis and the roots of that psychosis. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try to read to some of my SJS Direct publications, like The Man Crisis and Why 70% of Black Women Are Single, to learn in depth the deep damage done to the beta male mind of these beta male black men, and what is leading to many of these black women out here to be single. You can pick up both of those books in ebook on Amazon.com, and you can pick up The Man Crisis in paperback and ebook on Amazon.com, and you can pick it up on ebook formats on Smashwords, Barnes & Noble, and the iBookstore. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.